Testing. Testing. There we go. Just testing some things out.
I'm just not like minded toward believing in virtually any of them. Probably too much, though, to be honest. But this is weird. Something weird is happening at the FBI, or so it would seem. So Kash Patel sat down with Bret Baier for special report last night, meaning Wednesday evening, and they got into a bit of like what's happening with the Epstein files. Where are they? Listen to this.
There are. The Epstein thing, you dealt with Maria, you said, as far as you know, he killed himself.
I'm telling you, he killed himself.
The other thing on the internet is the Epstein files. What's the answer to that?
He does not look
the answer
comfortable.
To that is the same as everything else. I'm not going to withhold information from the American public ever, but I'm also not going to rush to get it out there in a format in which they can't rely on it. So on the Epstein matter or any other matters, we are diligently working on that, and it takes time to go through years of investigations, years of political maneuvering, and years of cover-up to get the American people what they deserve. And that's what I'm going to give them on everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's him talking about Epstein. He said he believes Epstein committed suicide and that they're going through the files to make sure we get everything. This, of course, comes on the heels of Pam Bondi calling all these influencers to the White House and giving them files saying this is everything, only to find out that everything in those files was already publicly released and there was absolutely nothing new in them. Okay. Then she said the FBI's got documents we didn't know about, so we're going to get to the bottom of them. This is months ago. And now he says they're going through them. I mean, it's been a while. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not saying he's lying. I just don't know what's happening here. I haven't figured it out. So Dan Bongino goes on Fox and Friends, and here he is talking about Epstein, SOT 12.
Look how this guy looks.
There is nothing in the file at this point on the Epstein case, and there's going to be a disclosure on this coming shortly. We are working through there is video. That is something the public does not.
There's video of him killing himself.
No, not the actual act, but the entire MCC Bay. It was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release. That's what's taken a while on this. We are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced.
Right. That is such a bad thing to say. We are working on cleaning it up.
And we're going to give the original, so you don't think there were any shenanigans.
We'll give you the original cleanup.
You're going to see there's no one there but him.
Right.
There's just nobody there. So I say to people all the time, if you have a tip, let us know. But there's no DNA, there's no audio, there's no fingerprints, there's no suspects, there's no accomplices, there's no tips, there is nothing. If you have it, I'm happy to see it. There's video clear as day. He's the only person in there and the only person coming out. You can see it.
All right, Glenn, what's happening? Because it doesn't take that long to clean up, quote, clean up surveillance video from one camera of one cell. I'm not sure what's happening here. I trust Dan. I don't know Cash as well, but I trust Dan. But I'm not sure we're getting the straight scoop.
Well, I think that's the key context, is that the two people kind of being out front on this are Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who over the last 4 years as kind of pundits and guests on podcasts and the like, have been among the most popular people in the MAGA movement, the most trusted people in the MAGA movement, and also the most militant when it came to the Epstein files. You can find tape of both of them, especially Kash Patel, saying it is an outrage that we don't have these files. The FBI director could release them today. What is he hiding? So that created an expectation that when Kash Patel and Dan Bongino got into that exact office, FBI director, deputy director, that they would then rectify what they had been so vociferously complaining about. Here we are 5 months later, and we don't actually have anything. The second thing is, I'm not somebody who really aggressively doubted that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. I could see somebody who lived a life of luxury and
we don't care if he really killed himself or not. People care to know who's on the list. Who is on the list? We got Musk saying Trump was on the list. You know, they're going through a little breakup right now.
And you know, living the high life, facing certain life in prison and deciding it's not worth it and trying to kill themselves. I don't really understand why people kill themselves in a federal prison, but it's happened before. But if they have proof that he killed himself, why don't they release it? That was the whole idea of transparency. And okay, if there's a video that needs work, how about the documents and the file they said they've seen? But here's the biggest issue making with the Epstein file. The question that has always hovered over the Jeffrey Epstein case was he got that sweetheart deal back in 2010 for trafficking minors for prostitution from Alex Acosta. He barely went to prison, got like a sweetheart deal. And Alex Acosta said afterward, I was told he was intelligence and therefore to leave him alone. So the real question, aside from like, are there people who participated with Jeffrey Epstein that we haven't heard of yet? And I'm not sure of that. We've had a lot of client lists released and the like.
How the hell are you? If somebody's going to tell you that he's intelligence and to leave him alone when you're prosecuting him, then wouldn't you have dropped prosecution altogether? I mean, you wouldn't even have gave him. But again, we're talking about a case where he was messing with children. Oh, he's intelligence. How is that even a fucking thing? So what? If I get an intelligence officer's job, I can just do whatever the fuck I want to do?
Jeffrey Epstein working with or for foreign intelligence agencies or domestic intelligence agencies. And if they have 1,000 or 5,000 videos of Jeffrey Epstein having sex with minors, feel free to go watch those. That's not what people are interested in them. Why can't they first release those documents about who else, to whom he sex trafficked children, given that nobody has been charged with receiving the sex trafficking, only Epstein with the sex trafficking? Those are the kinds of things that I don't think we're getting very...
I mean, if you sex traffic somebody, doesn't that imply that you sold them for sex? Okay, well, then that means there's a buyer. Where is the buyers? Where's that list at? Huh?
Persuasive answers from, and Pam Bondi's excuse, oh, we have all these sex tapes to go through. That's not relevant to either of those questions. Go through those sex tape over years, but in the meantime, give us these relevant documents that you promised very vocally that when you got into power,
you really got to go over them?
It's starting to smell, for sure. Like when they both gave a joint interview, Dan and Cash, and they were like, he committed suicide. They looked like hostages. They have the disadvantage of us having heard countless hours of Dan in particular speaking extemporaneously and from the heart, and he is an honest guy.
Take everything else out and
certain
put that
limits
just
to
in
how
there.
honest you can be when you're holding these positions. And I had the same reaction that a lot of people had, which is he looks like he's not being fully transparent.
Only people
What do
that
they know
are
that they don't want us to know. And this is the best theory I've heard, what you just espoused, that it's something having to do with Jeffrey Epstein's ties to intelligence. And that would be something they'd have to keep covered potentially. And they can't say it. They can't be as
it's something we
transparent
should
as
know,
they'd
though.
like to be.
They would keep it covered, but it's something we should absolutely know. And
Absolutely,
I think
but they won't tell that.
Exactly.
What if he's our asset, right? If he's our asset, like they're not going to run around saying he was our asset.
Or an ally's asset, or we should just know that is Jeffrey Epstein committed some of the most grotesque crimes involving huge numbers of American elites over many years. We should know the answer to that question. Was this an intelligence operation at the beginning or at some point in the middle? And they have those answers and we don't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's a second point on the subject of the pipe bombs, which they announced earlier this week. They're going to reopen the investigation into who put a pipe bomb at the DNC offices and also at the RNC offices. And Kamala Harris's motorcade drove right by the one. So Kash Patel first on that. Do we have the SOT now? SOT 45.
Does the FBI know who it is?
The FBI, under me and Dan Bongino's leadership, has reestablished that investigations of great public importance that almost blew up the DNC and RNC in Washington, D.C., an area in which then Vice President Harris was in the vicinity of, is something that needs to be answered. And we learned that FBI leadership in the prior administration slow-rolled and basically shut that investigation off. So we turned it on. And we have some great leads, and Dan is actually going to talk about that when he does Fox and Friends tomorrow.
Okay. You don't want to give us a little something?
I can't get ahead of everybody.
All right.
So the pipe bombs are also suspicious because they were placed on January 5th at the DNC and the RNC, we believe, and discovered the next day, January 6th in the afternoon. And now here we are, 4.5 years later, and we don't have a suspect. And the question there is like, what's going on? Why don't we have a suspect on that? Like a bomb that almost took out the vice president? Like, seems like something we'd have an all hands on deck situation on.
You're telling me they haven't found a video showing person playing that?
Under Biden and then under Trump, but we didn't. And so then we look forward to Dan Bongino going on Fox and Friends this morning because Kash Patel is the one who teed him up. Like, Dan's going to have more news on that tomorrow. And we didn't cut this out because it was so unfulfilling. I'll just tell you what he said. He was asked to watch the beginning of that again.
Does the FBI know who it is?
The FBI, under me and Dan Bongino's leadership, has reestablished that investigations of great public importance that needs to be answered. And we learned that FBI leadership
is something that needs to be answered. No offense to Kash Patel, but that does not sound like a truth teller to me at all. Truth tellers run toward the truth. Yes, we know. No, we don't know. They don't look up and give you general statements about the FBI and general investigatory measures. Something's going on here with the pipe bomb thing. And now Dan Bongino gets on Fox and Friends and says that filler, empty stuff, which didn't advance the ball at all.
Yeah, exactly. And you notice the passive phrasing there too. Kash Patel said this is a...
So what happened? Because you didn't find bin Laden there, but you found all of his henchmen.
Yeah.
You killed him.
Yeah.
And then are you like done? Because bin Laden's still out there.
A fucking ceasefire. And someone called a ceasefire. And I would also say there's a couple helicopters flew over the battlefield, which I still to this day don't know who they were.
Oh, you think he was escaping?
I look at it this way. If the first 10 days of the war, 10 guys kill bin Laden, where's the war on terror at?
Oh, this is interesting.
The checkbook would have never got opened.
Oh, that's really interesting.
That's what I think.
So you're pretty cynical about our military-industrial complex.
I wouldn't say cynical. I enjoyed my time. I love grenades, you know what I mean? But I do think
I love grenades.
The rug was pulled out from under us.
Well, it definitely was at the end, but are you talking about right here, right now, when you're trying to find bin Laden? You don't think that the military brass wanted you to find him? They wanted it to go on and on?
No. I think someone else intervened and put him in hiding. Someone who owned helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
regular people own helicopters. Who owns helicopters? You know what I mean? And then how come I've never heard about this anywhere else?
I don't know. No one wants to talk about this.
I know, right? See what I'm saying?
But I mean, are you talking about, like I say, the military industrial complex, like one of these big contractors? Or are you talking about us?
I don't know. I mean, you can make your own guesses. You know what I'm saying? But I would say this is like, okay, where's the story between where he lived in Pakistan and Tora Bora? Where's that story also, by the way? I want to know that story.
Do we know?
I have no idea. You?
No.
You ever heard anything?
No.
We need this, like these JFK files. Let's go.
Well,
you know what I mean?
You actually have a shot at it right now with this administration.
Well, there you go. You know these guys.
I got a friend over at the Pentagon.
There you go.
I mean, we can get to the bottom of that.
There you go.
Well, it's unfortunately and totally understandably, so many of our veterans are asking these questions now, including Sean. You know, I talked to him at length about his questions about who are the good guys. And
we're not. I don't think we are at all.
don't?
I don't think we're good friends.
Why?
I think we deal on a short timeline, a 4-year timeline. And I think everyone else has like been in charge for 50 years. You know what I mean? And they've seen us flip-flop back and forth, and we pull, we push, we tug a war with the rope. It never ends out good. We're not good friends. And then as soon as you don't do what we want, we're going to chuck you under the bus and move the fuck on. You know what I mean?
Like, give me an example.
I don't know, tons of stuff. You know what I mean? I'm giving you an example right now. Where are these helicopters at? Where's the story of bin Laden from Abbottabad, where that's where the officers are trained in Pakistan? Interesting, right? And how did he get out of Afghanistan? He's on dialysis. You mean this guy walked over 14,000-foot mountains in the snow with his little woolen blanket and his dialysis machine, but left all his people behind? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but I think I think George Bush said dead or alive, and I think the Pentagon was risk adverse. And I think that's where the disconnect was at that time. But I think someone else stepped in and took bin Laden into hiding.
And when we found him in 2010, trying to remember my
stand. Security measures were so stringent that the courier did not know about the letters he was transmitting, and bin Laden never met him or knew who he actually was. Nothing could be worse. He'd rather be captured and killed than to have this data exposed. Before we begin, for more background, we would like to recommend these fantastic short docs by our colleague and friend Neo on how bin Laden was found. Also, this video is largely based on the book The Bin Laden Papers by Nellie Lahoud. Links are in the description. Now, let's dive into the incredible story behind these hard drives.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
When the U.S. Navy SEALs raided Abbottabad to capture bin Laden, they were supposed to stay for only 30 minutes or less. Most successful missions take no longer, and any delay would amplify the danger. But when they spot, quote, a shit ton of computers in the compound, the potential intelligence value is too tempting. They deviate from the plan to return ASAP. They gather up the electronics and deliver them to the CIA. Sifting through the files is a gargantuan task. Every Arabic-speaking linguist in the intelligence community is on the job. There's lots of normal stuff you might find on just about anyone's computer. Home videos, news clippings, memes. Excessive amounts of pornography. Then there is the expected terrorist content, Al-Qaeda propaganda, and so on. But that's not the interesting part. On these hard drives, US intelligence discovers a treasure trove of letters. The bulk of Al-Qaeda's communications were typed or handwritten, then transmitted by couriers on a SIM card. For security reasons, bin Laden did not have internet access the whole time he was in hiding. The letters were exchanged through what Al-Qaeda called a closed circle. A courier moved between two intermediaries, one on bin Laden's side and one on the side of his trusted associate in North Waziristan, a mountainous part of Pakistan bordering Afghanistan.
Kind of like how Scientology worked, but they were unable to communicate.
Transmitting, and bin Laden never met him or knew who he actually was. Using couriers was cumbersome and dangerous, but it worked. For 10 years, bin Laden successfully remained hidden, and the world was in the dark when it came to Al-Qaeda. Until, of course. We rely heavily on high-powered computers to produce these videos, but sometimes we might just want to work in a cafe or abroad or on the beach even. We can't take our giant desktops with us, but there is another, much cleaner solution. AnyDesk is a lightning-fast, secure, and reliable access software for seamless remote work and file sharing. It's free for personal use and supports remote video editing, 3D printing, CMS monitoring, and much more. It's easy to use for even the least tech-savvy, but powerful enough for advanced use like remote server maintenance. The clean interface makes AnyDesk a breeze for anyone to use. It's available for all platforms, from your laptop to your phone, all the way to your grandmother's Windows XP machine. If you're looking to collaborate remotely and need something fast and flexible, check it out at anydesk.com/Fern. We really do use AnyDesk regularly and can highly recommend it. Upon discovery of the hard drives, the CIA got straight to work extracting the immediate intelligence gains. What they found, they acted upon quickly. For example, the files helped them locate Al-Qaeda's chief operations officer in Pakistan's tribal regions. They killed him by a drone strike within 4 months of the Abbottabad raid. Al-Qaeda's top legal scholar was found and killed shortly after. But after these quick results, many of Al-Qaeda's secrets remained buried on these hard drives, coded in the countless letters. It would take years to grasp the content of all these communications, and help came from outside the CIA.
And what I wanted to do was actually to chronicle Al-Qaeda's history post 9/11. And I wanted to do it through the letters. Not through secondary sources, but through the letters.
This is Dr. Nellie Lahoud. She studies the evolving ideologies of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and she led a team that analyzed and contextualized the contents of bin Laden's papers.
The declassification process began in 2012, and by 2017, the declassified files were massive. At one point, I came to realize this is where I was going to find Al-Qaeda's internal communications. And these were about 97,000 files. I was fortunate that I was able to have the support of 2 research assistants who were native Arabic speakers like me.
Lahoud and her assistants looked at all nearly 100,000 documents, and what they uncovered is astonishing. The letters reveal bin Laden's character and Al-Qaeda's inner workings. They lay bare bin Laden's future plans and deepest fears. They help map out the global jihadi landscape, and they offer a definitive account of Al-Qaeda's post-9/11 history, which up until then was deeply misunderstood. Tora Bora, which means black dust in Pashto, is a remote and barren part of eastern Afghanistan. Bin Laden loves this region and knows it well. It held a special place in bin Laden's heart since the 1980s, when he made a pilgrimage from Saudi Arabia to assist the Afghan Mujahideen in the holy cause of fighting the Soviets. He helped fund the construction of cave complexes in the region and recruited fighters who contributed to the broader resistance movement. The Soviets eventually withdrew, and bin Laden believed his contributions to be decisive. The victorious Afghan jihad inspired the formation of Al-Qaeda, which means the base of an Islamist legion that could wage jihad anywhere. At that time, bin Laden and the Americans were on the same side, both in Tora Bora, supporting the Afghan Mujahideen and resisting a Soviet invasion. Now 14 years later, bin Laden is cowering from them, fleeing into the same mountains that he once used as a stronghold. But the CIA are on his tracks. On December 3rd, 2001, the situation turns grim for Al-Qaeda. The Americans start bombing relentlessly. Al-Qaeda members are hiding in caves at 9,000 feet, shivering in 10 degrees below freezing. They have no access to drinking water because it's frozen. The bombs keep raining destruction. Against all odds, bin Laden escapes the US troops, but he's not feeling celebratory. He knows that at any moment he can be killed, so he hastily draws up his will. And in his will, bin Laden writes to his children, "Forgive me, because I have given you only a little of my time since I answered the jihad call. I have chosen a road fraught with dangers, and for this sake suffered from hardships, embitterment, betrayal, and treachery. I advise you not to work with Al-Qaeda." It's a low moment for bin Laden, and it's not just because death is around the corner. It's also because he made a horrible mistake. and now he knows it.
What the letters reveal is that Al-Qaeda had not anticipated that the United States would launch a war in response to 9/11. At most, they thought that the United States would respond with limited airstrikes.
Al-Qaeda was completely unprepared. They didn't even have a plan A. Bin Laden made a huge miscalculation. He believed the United States was fundamentally weak, a paper tiger with no real bite. Not all jihadis suffer from this delusion.
Yeah, you learned different, didn't you?
High-level jihadis and Muslim religious authorities warned bin Laden that the Americans would attack the whole Middle East if he launched an attack on U.S. soil. But he waved off their concerns confidently. He was certain that the United States didn't have the resources for a counterattack. Bin Laden's stated purpose of 9/11 was to serve as a decisive blow to force the United States to withdraw its military forces from Muslim-majority countries. Well, quite the opposite happened.
Yeah, literally.
Now bin Laden had no choice but to acknowledge the true power of his sworn enemy. Several key al-Qaeda members are already dead, captured or displaced into unfriendly countries. The Taliban, who has been aiding al-Qaeda, has fallen rapidly, but it would take bin Laden years to publicly admit his mistake. For their part, the United States also misunderstood the power of their enemy. But in their case, the opposite was true. They believed al-Qaeda was far more powerful than it actually was.
That makes sense.
Up until bin Laden's death, al-Qaeda was widely perceived to be the major player in the global jihadi landscape. 9/11 shocked the world, and it was assumed that only a very powerful network could harm the world's greatest superpower in such a devastating manner. Most people believed al-Qaeda was still pulling the strings when it came to other Islamist terrorism. The Madrid and London bombings of 2004 and 2005 were falsely reported to have been orchestrated by the group. And for a while, bin Laden fed that narrative, publicly cheering on jihadis and allowing people to believe that he was calling the shots. Al-Qaeda continued to release public statements, which allowed them to project strength that they did not have. They fed the illusion that the jihadi landscape was a united front. But the papers show that the post-9/11 reality looked quite different.
So when bin Laden disappeared from the scene, we learned that he stopped communicating with his associates for about 3 years. Now, he was watching the news, he was releasing public statements, but he had no knowledge about what was happening in the world of Al-Qaeda itself because he was hiding. So between 2004 all the way to 2011, all the letters make it absolutely clear that Al-Qaeda did not have the resources and did not have the personnel to mount international terrorism.
Quote-unquote successful jihadis capable of international terrorism were in almost all cases operating independently of al-Qaeda. From the outside, the movement appeared to be united under al-Qaeda, but in reality, the network was riddled with internal divisions. Al-Qaeda was at constant odds with affiliate groups because of differing strategies, power struggles, and serious trust issues. Later letters show that much of al-Qaeda's post-9/11 focus was on managing these tensions. In highly bureaucratic al-Qaeda memos, you can tell that bin Laden's educational background is in business administration and not religious scripture. He's a hands-on boss with a tendency to micromanage, running al-Qaeda like a failing company. He's preoccupied with the competition, with rebranding, with PR scandals, and with potential mergers. He's anxiously trying and failing to control the affiliate groups. He's afraid different strategies are tarnishing the al-Qaeda brand.
These groups ended up focusing their attention locally, and in the process, they mounted many indiscriminate attacks that saw many Muslim casualties, and this upset bin Laden deeply. Many, if not probably all these attacks, were not authorized by bin Laden or the top leadership of al-Qaeda. We find bin Laden and his associates remarkably calling for less terrorism rather than more terrorism out of these groups. But this isn't to kind of paint them as being, peaceful makers. They wanted the attacks of all these groups to be targeting the United States.
The United States' counterterrorism efforts didn't reflect any of this complexity. The Americans believed that al-Qaeda was growing stronger by the day. They were fixated on al-Qaeda as the main threat, pouring a huge amount of resources into finding bin Laden. And just after the 9/11 attacks, the Bush administration passed the authorization for the use of military force. This legislation allowed military force to be used against anyone considered to be associated with the attacks, without requiring explicit approval from Congress. If a jihadist could reasonably be linked with al-Qaeda, then military activities in the region could be pursued more swiftly. Meanwhile, other, more threatening jihadi groups were growing in strength, outside the purview of the Americans' enormous military resources. As a result, in 2014, al-Qaeda was overtaken by a rival jihadist group. A group that was formerly an offshoot, they had broken away, largely due to strategic disagreements. Bin Laden tried and failed to keep that group under control, but after a point, they simply stopped responding to his letters. That group is now known as ISIS. The letters reveal another fascinating delusion of bin Laden, which helps explain why he was ultimately captured. For nearly a decade, bin Laden has been on the run from the US. His entire life and the lives of his family members are focused on evading capture. It pains bin Laden that his family is stuck in hiding. The papers show that he's a caring family man who is intensely worried about the safety and well-being of his loved ones. He might be a mass murderer, but he reads his grandkids stories every night. It's a tough life in isolation, but his careful security measures have kept him safe. At one point in 2010, bin Laden receives a letter that one of his couriers might have been captured. This would compromise everything.
But instead of really starting to pack his bag, he chose to stay where he did. Why? Bin Laden had a soft spot for his family. At that time, his wife, who was detained in Iran, as well as his son, were released, and they wanted to join him.
So bin Laden's role as a kindly patriarch may have been the reason for his ultimate downfall. He was too wrapped up in his family matters to give the courier threat his full attention. But there was another reason, something completely unexpected. A world historical event. Not he nor the world at large saw it coming. Suddenly, bin Laden's obsession with security took a backseat role because his attention shifted. In December 2010, a wave of uprising thunders throughout the Arab world. People are fed up with corruption, poverty, and authoritarianism. The Arab Spring sends shockwaves through the Middle East and the rest of the world. The initially peaceful protests turn deadly. Governments are overthrown. Civil wars erupt. At first, bin Laden is overjoyed that people are demanding the removal of corrupt dictators, which he and other jihadists have been advocating for years. Bin Laden sees a power vacuum, and he plans to fill it. He's long wanted to instigate regime changes in the Arab world. After all, that was the whole point of September 11. The United States was backing authoritarian regimes in Muslim-majority countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. The attack was meant to force them to retreat from the region. Then their puppet regimes in the Arab world would fall, and al-Qaeda could swoop in and install Taliban-style utopias. And now the people are overthrowing these regimes themselves. What could be better? Bin Laden and his family are excitedly preparing their response. We know this from a handwritten family journal found during the Abbottabad raid. The journal recorded the conversations of bin Laden's family, leading up to the night before his death. Every day, they're having intense debates about how al-Qaeda should navigate this new reality. There's just one problem. Al-Qaeda isn't exactly at the forefront of the protesters' demands. It seems that many people want democracy, and not a caliphate. And the situation keeps changing rapidly, so strategizing is tricky. In his last few days, bin Laden relies a lot upon his two millennial daughters to formulate a stance. Maryam and Sumaya are 19 and 21 at the time. The journal reveals them to be sharp, passionate, and willing to challenge their father. They ask him the hard questions, like, is it possible that some among the new generation will believe that political change can occur without jihad? After all, the West intervened in support of overthrowing the Libyan dictator and seems generally in favor of the uprisings. Bin Laden is stumped. At points he is almost hopeless in his confusion, one day saying, "We cannot do anything except intensify our prayers." But his daughters push him to make a statement. The political moment is too important to waste.
So the role of his daughters was remarkable, and we find in the letters by various family members that Maryam and Sumaya, to quote one letter, worked very closely with their father, and their writings were broadcast on TV, meaning that it was their work, their writings, that bin Laden had delivered in his public statement over the years. So clearly they were doing the heavy lifting at home. They were all on the same page in terms of their loyalty to jihad, their loyalty to, their commitment rather, to the cause for which bin Laden had spent his life doing. It was a family affair.
At the end of bin Laden's life, the papers reveal a man who is fearful, paranoid, and incapable of materializing most of his plans, large and small. He never achieves another large-scale attack on the United States.
No, I think one was bad enough. Yeah, fuck that motherfucker. That's why he got fucking taken out.
Oh,
It's
jihad,
October 2015,
jihad, oh.
a chilly day in August.
Looking at
John Brennan receives a weird phone call. It seems to be coming from a stranger. He hesitates a second, then picks up.
Hello?
John Brennan?
Who is this?
You're a f***ing loser.
If John Brennan hadn't been John Brennan, this might have looked like an ordinary prank call. But John Brennan happens to be one of the most powerful men on Earth, the head of the CIA.
Who is this?
What
How
the
did
fuck?
you get this number? It was so f***ing easy, bro. You're such a d***. What do you want? I don't want anything. I already f***ing own you. How much do you want? We want $5 trillion.
The US government will classify this call as part of a larger conspiracy of identity theft, harassment of government officials, and cyber terrorism. The caller will pay a heavy price for this moment of trollish glory.
Why are you doing this? We want you to stop bombing the Middle East.
Across the Atlantic, in a house in the West Midlands of England, a 15-year-old kid in his room, the phone still in his hand. He can't believe what he just did.
By that accent,
He calls himself Cracker, and he loves to smoke weed. In fact, he's high right now.
Yeah,
He's also the leader of Crackers with Attitude. He and his companions terrorized and embarrassed the US security apparatus to a near incomparable degree. They leaked the personal data of police officers, FBI agents, and DOJ officials. They hand-delivered top-secret documents to Julian Assange. Some of the most publicized hacktivism attributed to Anonymous.
They call themselves Anonymous.
Yeah, it was actually them. In part for the lulz. And this is their story.
This was political.
Teenager
Cyber attacks.
hijacked the computers of several
Crackers with attitude.
A collective called Crackers with Attitude.
Crackers with attitude.
2008 in Virginia. A different kid, who only calls himself Default. He's a pretty typical American teenager. He loves soccer, video games, and his dog. He often clashes with his father, who works in the government. At some point, Default starts cheating in his video games. This gives him the first taste of using computers to do things that you're not supposed to. Exciting, powerful things. He starts learning all that he can about how computers work, and how to get them to bend to your will. 2008 was an exciting time to get into hacking. The decentralized hacktivist group, Anonymous, was in its heyday. If you managed to get into their secret chats, you got a front-seat view of their actions.
Anonymous is one of the biggest online vigilante groups. Members hack into companies and governments.
Now a worldwide and widely recognized hacking group.
Hackers with the group Anonymous.
Citizens of the world. We have seen the erosion of due process.
A cyber war.
Anonymous.
Anonymous has struck again.
Young Default is fascinated. Anonymous embodies an exciting spirit of freedom through chaos. They showed how you could force the whole world to pay attention without you having to leave your bedroom. Some Anonymous actions are political, some are just trolling, and Default, after tasting this very new kind of power, is keen to learn everything he can about hacking. He starts to hack random websites just for the challenge of it, just to see if he can. But after hanging around Anonymous's chats for a while, he starts to find the group, well, cringe. For one thing, it's crawling with feds. People are getting arrested, and it's tough to know who to trust. Anonymous has become so big that vetting people becomes difficult. There's tons of infighting and doxing. Since it's the only hacktivist group most media outlets know about, Anonymous keeps getting credited for the work of other, often more sophisticated hackers. It's a mess. So Default gets involved with offshoot hacker groups, one of them called AnonSec. The group positions itself as anti-Anonymous. But similar to Anonymous, AnonSec performs operations, hacking initiatives that sometimes have a political purpose, and sometimes are just, as one might say in 2008, for the lulz. I hated recording that. AnonSec is quite advanced, and Default gets better and better at the game. The group controls a botnet. A botnet is essentially a large pack of infected computers under someone's control. You can use those computers to further spread malware across the internet to make the botnet larger and larger. Or you could, for example, attack a server with it in order to overload it. Default is tapping around AnonSec's botnet and gets curious about what computers they've actually gotten under their control. He finds that one is a server of the Canadian Medical School, Windsor University.
Imagine doing a
Suddenly,
DDoS
Default finds himself with direct access to the university's finances. He pulls up records of students who owe the school money. It all adds up to $9.4 million. And at the bottom of the list, something very tempting. A delete all button. How could he not push it?
These people might, really enjoy having their slate wiped clean, as it were. If you look, some of them owe a substantial amount of money, like 70,000. I think some people owed upwards of over 100,000. It's a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? It's just like perpetual debt that sometimes it just lasts for decades. So, just deleted everything. I went into the PHP shell and just sent everything to dev null. Just
but wouldn't they have fucking paper documents?
Whatever I sent there is just not coming back.
Did he really
This is from the podcast Darknet Diaries. They have a fantastic episode with Default. Of course, this story poses some questions. We tried asking the university if the debt stayed deleted. They did not answer. But usually student loans have multiple on and offline and offsite backups. There should be hard copies of the student's signed loan agreements.
Exactly.
However, Default feels like he's really doing something at the time. There is a certain rush to committing a crime when it feels like doing the right thing. Other hackers might have used the sensitive student information to make a profit. There's actually a shadow industry worth billions surrounding our most sensitive data. So-called data brokers gather all the info available about us on the internet, your contact information, browsing history, and online transactions. This data is often bundled into shadow profiles, which are then being sold. You might receive a tailored mail or a robocall based on your shadow profile. In the worst case, someone might try to steal your identity. Incogni helps you remove your data from the numerous lists of data brokers. The only thing you have to do is create an account and allow Incogni to act on your behalf. Afterwards, you can easily track the status of all the requests in the dashboard. Check out incogni.com/FernTV for an exclusive 60% discount on a 1-year plan using the code FernTV. Additionally, benefit from a 30-day money-back guarantee. Despite Incogni's efforts, some of your data might still linger online. Always remain cautious when sharing personal information anywhere. By trying out Incogni, you're actively supporting our channel. More and more of Default's hacks are motivated by altruism rather than just curiosity. As recently as 2014, bestiality was legal in Denmark. Other European countries, Germany, the UK, Sweden, had recently banned it. What this meant for Denmark was an increase in animal sex tourism.
Recently?
For years, Danish animal rights activists tried to bring attention to this.
Oh my
They called them dog brothels. So sick. It's so crazy. And I had a dog, so that really pissed me off just thinking about the fact, what if someone took my dog and that happened to my dog? I would freak out.
So, as Default describes it, he and other AnonSec hackers lend their technical skills to the animal rights movement.
So I think we took down the official Denmark government website, and then we actually defaced it.
What?
And said, did you know that your government allows bestiality? And there's bestiality dens where people can go and pay money to do these things to animals. And most of them are
what the fuck,
people's pets.
They shut down bestiality websites via DDoS attacks and tweet evidence of sexually mistreated animals. The information reverberates around the world and is widely condemned. Anonymous gets credit for AnonSec's actions, which deeply annoys Default. But it works. In part due to the hacks, more people know about Danish dog brothels. They talk about them online, protest them, until the case winds up in Parliament. In April 2015, Denmark finally bans bestiality.
Yes! Thank God.
While Default is leveling up as a hacker, he also becomes an early adopter of crypto. He accumulates a significant amount of Bitcoin, more than 1,000. This would amount to a lot of money today, somewhere around 40 million US dollars. He keeps these Bitcoins on a hard drive in his room. He also knows he's making powerful enemies, so he gets a bit paranoid, a bit fanatical with his OPSEC. He never logs into his own Wi-Fi, for one. He uses a satellite dish to log into a free Dairy Queen Wi-Fi half a mile away. He's always connecting through a Tor node. Every time he turns off his devices, he makes sure they're encrypted. When he turns them back on, he has to wait 30 minutes for them to decrypt. For the most part, he never tells anybody what he is doing. He knows he has a lot to lose. Ultimately, it won't be enough.
Oh shit. He's gonna get fucked up.
Back in May 2013, a 29-year-old US intelligence contractor also has a lot to lose. He has his own home in Honolulu, a loving girlfriend, and a salary of over $200,000 per year. But he's discovered a huge secret, and it's too big to keep. The US government has the ability to spy on pretty much any man, woman, child on Earth who has come into contact with a computer. And this contractor, unwittingly, has helped make that technology possible. He's haunted by this information and horrified that his government is violating its public civil rights so egregiously. He knows that revealing this information to anyone, a lawyer, a judge, or even Congress, would be committing felonies so severe that he would spend a lifetime in prison. He's worried he'll never see his family again, and he doesn't know what consequences they'll encounter if he blows the whistle. But he has to do it. He's been quietly collecting evidence of this secret for a while, and he's just downloaded the last documents. He tells his employer, the US government, that he needs a couple of weeks off to manage his epilepsy. This buys him a bit of time to leave the country without arousing suspicion. He chooses Hong Kong because he views it as a bastion of free speech. He believes it's one of the few places in the world that could and would protect him from the wrath of the US government. There he meets journalists Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald and delivers evidence of what used to be waved off as a conspiracy theory. And so Edward Snowden becomes one of the most important whistleblowers of our modern time. Snowden's revelations scandalize the world and spark a long overdue debate about individual privacy versus national security. He inspires many young Americans like Default to take a good hard look at how their government functions. Default doesn't want to sit around and let surveillance happen to him. He wants high-ranking intelligence officials to know what it feels like to be spied upon, to have their private information stored and distributed, and to have it used against them. This is when he teams up with the Crackers with Attitude, founded by Cracker, the kid who's always high. Leicestershire, England, 2015. In a housing estate on the outskirts of a sleepy former mining town, there's not a lot to do except get high or go online. In the case of 15-year-old Cracker, he spends his time doing both. He's angry about corruption, about surveillance, but in particular about the US's involvement in the Middle East. He becomes especially focused on Palestine and sees the US as directly responsible for death and suffering in Gaza. He decides to do something about it.
This was political. We heard he was really angry about US foreign policy. So he started a collective called Crackers with Attitude, and then he hacked into sensitive documents online.
One of his first victims is James Clapper, then the National Director of Intelligence of the Obama administration. Clapper, one of the highest-ranking members of the intelligence community, had his phone number and address waiting to be found with just one Google search. This provides Cracker with enough information to hack into his email. He posts proof of it on Twitter, which catches Default's attention. Cracker then gets the phone calls to Clapper's house phone rerouted to the Free Palestine movement. Default tweets his respect to Cracker, and the two start chatting. Edward Snowden himself has given James Clapper a very special shout-out in an interview with the German broadcaster ARD. Unfortunately, that interview was blocked from US and German television networks. Apparently, the video is immediately taken down every time it's posted on YouTube, so we'll only show the quotes visually.
I would say sort of the breaking point is seeing the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, directly lie under oath to Congress.
What we do not do is spy unlawfully on Americans, or for that matter, spy indiscriminately on the citizens of any country. We only spy for valid foreign intelligence purposes as authorized by law, with multiple layers of oversight to ensure we don't abuse our authorities.
Kraka and Default are livid. Kraka and other hackers loosely connected with CWA team up to target more high-ranking members of the intelligence community. They want to embarrass them and to show them that they aren't as powerful as they think they are. At the top of their list is John Brennan, head of the CIA. Brennan, like Clapper, has enough information online that he basically doxes himself. Kraka looks up his publicly posted phone number and finds out it's a Verizon number. He calls up Verizon's internal tech support and pretends to be an on-site technician who's having trouble helping a customer on site. Tech support asks Kraka for his employee code, and he just makes one up on the spot. It works. The support technician provides Kraka with access, and suddenly he has the account number, the PIN, and John Brennan's private email address. If you have just enough information on someone, pieced together from different sources, say, their address and last 4 digits of their social security number, you can easily change the passwords on all kinds of accounts and take it over. And that's exactly what Kraka does with Brennan's AOL account. Once he's in the email account, Kraka gets Brennan's private cell number and shares it with Default. And so they start spam calling the director of the CIA, relentlessly calling him and his family.
I told him he was a piece of shit. Basically, like, y'all are awful people. Like, really. Like, you're not doing any net positive things for the world. You're just not.
John Brennan is freaked out. Sure, the calls are little more than a prank, but how could he know that? At the time, nobody knew who was behind the calls, or what their intentions were. Brennan has to lay low for a while in hiding, with extra security details for himself and his family. At the same time, Kraka's breach into Brennan's email gives him access to sensitive documents. Kraka first posts screenshots on Twitter, but then, egged on by Default, and maybe asking himself, what would Snowden do? He decides to hit up WikiLeaks. Julian Assange himself takes interest. He publishes the documents in October 2015. They include Brennan's 47-page SF-86 application, a sensitive form required for obtaining top-secret government security clearance. The form reveals his criminal history, psychological records, past drug abuse, and other details nobody would want about themselves online. Not only that, from Brennan's emails, WikiLeaks publishes Bush-era recommendations for how the presidency should operate in the Middle East. There's also an internal congressional correspondence from the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that offered suggestions on how to make future interrogation methods, also known as torture, compliant and legal. The breach cost the agency $1.5 million in damages and relocation costs, as several operatives went into hiding before they knew that there was basically no threat level. Above all, it was widely embarrassing. Hacking into Brennan's email was laughably easy.
This is true, and it's true that you guys have actually broken into his private email account. How difficult would you say it is?
You mean out of 10?
Sure, out of 10.
1.
1.
There's a lot of, I guess, private information, really. He's pretty stupid, really. He's supposed to be so high in the government, like head of CIA, then he should be a bit more clever.
Can you give us any indication of your background? I mean, how old you are? Are you in the United States? I mean, anything you can tell me about yourself?
Yeah, I'm below the age of 20 years old. I smoke pot, and I live in America.
And you smoke pot?
All day, every day.
We wonder what John Brennan must have thought, while undoubtedly watching this in his relocation house. What fury must have built up inside him. The CWA aren't done. They release more and more information. With control over Clapper's and other operatives' accounts, it's even easier to get people to give up information to in turn access further accounts and databases. They gain access to FBI's Deputy Director Mark Giuliano's account. There, they discover a database with personal information of 9,000 Department of Justice officials and 20,000 FBI agents. They post it. They then get access to the Justice Department's Joint Automated Booking System, which has records on all U.S. prisoners. They check out the records of fellow hackers like Jeremy Hammond and post those online as well. They wreak havoc and embarrass one institution after another. Did these kids really think that they were going to get away with it?
At the time, I really didn't care. I just that was towards the end of the run and was just like, all bets are off. You know, I'd gone all the way down the rabbit hole. I just become very disillusioned with people's complacency and their lack of care for what was going on. So it's like, we're going to bring attention to this with like chaos and mayhem.
Kraka knows his actions have poked a very big bear. He knows there will be consequences. He just doesn't know what they'll exactly be.
I'm gonna go to Russia and chill with Snowden, because I know that the government are pretty mad about this. I'm probably gonna get tortured. I'm actually a pretty fast runner.
Default is paranoid the whole time, constantly worried about his OPSEC. But he let his guard down. Default became involved with an ex-girlfriend of one of his friends. According to him, he asked his friend in advance if it's okay with him. The friend says sure, go for it. He's way over it. But he isn't. Default and his friend are hanging out one night, drinking and chatting over Xbox Live.
I slip up for the first time ever. Being f***ing arrogant and cocky. It comes on the news, CIA director hacked, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that was us, blah, blah. I was like drunk, talking, and just totally like gave myself away.
He never thought his friend would do anything with that information. Hell, he didn't even think his friend would necessarily believe him. But today, Default is pretty sure this friend turned him in. When the FBI raids you, they don't knock politely. FBI agents enter Default's room just as his computer finishes decrypting. They are pointing assault rifles in his face. They drag him out of his room, flash copy his hard drive before it re-encrypts, and seize all of his equipment. Default knows he's finished, but the worst part, watching the agents carry off his hard drive. The hard drive with nearly 1,000 Bitcoin. He blacks out. Kraka, too, gets raided by the British police forces, and his computers are confiscated. One other CWA member gets arrested in the US, and 3 more in the UK. Since Kraka was underage and in the United Kingdom, he got a lenient sentence. He spent 2 years in a juvenile detention center. He was the first minor in the UK to be imprisoned for hacking. Today, he's keeping his head down and is done with crime. He just wants to make a career in cybersecurity and move on with his life. He did not want to give us an interview. Default, even though he was less involved, paid a much higher price. He went straight to federal prison with a 5-year sentence. He had to pay $145,000 in restitution, and due to COVID regulations, spent a significant amount of that time in solitary confinement. While pleading in court, he said, "I thought what I was doing was right in terms of political justice, but 2 years later, I realized I was completely wrong." Snowden, too, didn't have a relaxed time fighting asylum in Russia. Shortly after his leak, intelligence officials publicly fantasized about killing him. Whether you're a principled whistleblower who truly understands the significance of what you're leaking, or a stone teen furious at the world's injustices, messing with the US government will change the course of your life forever. So make sure it's worth it. In December 2023, the Biden administration renewed a very controversial surveillance program. The act allows the administration to spy on anyone in the world without warrant, including its own citizens. It includes a vast database of electronic communications. It's supposed to be accessed only when there's a legitimate reason to believe it will assist intelligence operations. But a US court ruling in 2023 found that the FBI has already misused this database 278,000 times. Unlawful searches were particularly rampant between 2016 and 2020. They've snooped in the private communications of donors to various congressional candidates. They've been watching suspected January 6 rioters, and they've also been surveilling Black Lives Matter protesters. Maybe they're even surveilling us.
Had been some January 6 people in pardon. Feds protect alleged accomplices exposing shocking details. Let's see, then how does
it has
read
come
though?
up a lot during the course of Sean Diddy Combs' criminal trial. The protection offered to witnesses to testify against the rap mogul now accused of federal sex crimes. But what is immunity exactly? How has it been used in this case? Why do certain witnesses seemingly need or want it? And
Because they're complacent. They're just as guilty.
does this kind of
You
prove
don't sit there
the
and watch
charges in this case?
beat
Or
that
show
woman
these
up?
witnesses can't be trusted? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime.
No, they can't.
I'm Jesse Weber.
I can't believe the
Hey everybody, this is
feds are
another
giving
law and crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later to see if you
they
qualify,
really want to
say
get
about
his
the
ass.
case and conduct. So
They're willing
Combs
to
couldn't
give
have
all these
engaged
other
in
people immunity.
racketeering conspiracy alone. Wouldn't others be a part of it? Yeah, sure, he's the only defendant in this case, but racketeering conspiracy by its nature means there had to be an agreement.
Exactly. How do you racketeer and have a conspiracy with one
With
person?
others. So wouldn't others be a part of it? And since he's the only one charged, wouldn't these alleged co-conspirators or collaborators or facilitators need to
See, that's the thing that might end up. I kind of agree with Sammy Gravano. They should have just charged him with all this shit by itself, separate, one after the other. They shouldn't have it into a RICO, because that just might be how he gets out of it.
testify?
If they argue, the jury doesn't like the fact that, yeah, he is charged with RICO, but they're giving immunity to all these people, and they're more or less complacent. The jury don't even have to convict him at all. I mean, but then again, they're never told about jury nullification, but most of them, if they're, they haven't done any research on their own, they know it exists. The jury can nullify any charge anytime they want to, but it's hardly ever practiced. I mean, and definitely wouldn't be something that the justice system would want.
Against him with some sort of legal protection. After all, this is what it says in the indictment. The defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. By the way,
And where are those other suspects? You can't have it both ways.
Prosecution has to prove at least 2 of these underlying predicate crimes in order to get a racketeering conspiracy conviction. Now, the indictment continues. The defendant used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his acts of violence, abuse, and commercial sex. Those employees including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors and other close associates acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. So, let's talk immunity, how it's come up in this trial, what this all means. For that, let me bring in Law and Crimes legal counsel Elizabeth Vulog, who I always love having here on Sidebar. Elizabeth, so good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Elizabeth, what is immunity in this context?
Yeah, great question. So basically what immunity means is it's an agreement when the prosecution agrees not to pursue prosecution against an individual, in this case, witness.
I mean, you could literally admit to murder and all types of crap. And if the prosecution has agreed, during the course of you talking about what it is to help them and something, they can't use it against you. Now, just like TVD learn, that don't mean that you can then go on out and do a public interview a year or 2 years later outside the scope of that immunity deal and tell the whole world, oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, they gave me immunity. They will charge your ass. I mean, you have to read the fine print.
Witnesses in the exchange for information that they're giving them. So the idea behind it is that,
That's why TVD is in jail right now over Tupac's murder. He had an agreement while he was giving those interviews privately to the detectives. His agreement didn't go outside of that. So when he goes later on Vlad or whatever else, and he writes his little book, he's now not only admitted of it on his own free will outside that agreement, he's also made money out of it. Oh yeah. They don't get you.
What prosecutors are after are not necessarily these individuals. The information that they have is much more valuable and important to them in building a case against Sean Combs. Obviously we had the testimony of Cassandra Ventura, but to prosecutors that wasn't enough. They have to show witnesses who, saw things happen, who helped facilitate this. So that's more valuable to the prosecutors. So in exchange for that, and also, some of these individuals, it could be argued, partook in criminal activities themselves to help Combs, with what he was doing. So in exchange for that truthful testimony, there's an agreement that they won't be prosecuted for what they testify to that could implicate them in a criminal proceeding.
But they could be prosecuted for something that's maybe separate and apart, but somehow connected to all this, or future crimes, right? It's not just blanket immunity across the board forever, right?
That's right. So usually it's targeted to, the testimony that they're giving, in this case as a witness. And, maybe there might be aspects, we know there's aspects where the witness took part in criminal activity. For what they testify to, they can't be prosecuted for those crimes. But, if there's something that is disclosed that's outside of what they testified to, or, it's revealed later.
Weaker if it was the United States versus Sean Combs and 10 other criminal defendants, his bodyguards, his assistants. That would be a more uphill climb for them to try to convict all of them. Whereas if their goal is to get the ringleader, then you get the cooperation of all of them. So I wasn't surprised that immunity was going to come up a lot during the course of this case, because in order to prove racketeering conspiracy, you need the inner circle and they need protection.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the whole racketeering charge is premised on the idea that Combs had used an enterprise of employees, of staff, of other individuals to help facilitate criminal actions, whether it's drug offenses, bribery, abuse, all those things are in the racketeering charge. So it's an interesting.
You're going to lose that Walk of Fame star, did you? I guarantee you, if they ain't taking it yet, they're going to take it the day you're convicted.
But it makes sense why the prosecutors took this tactic, is that they really need to go after Combs as the sole defendant to show he was, like you said, the ringleader. He was able to tell individuals what to do. He had used them to kind of commit these offenses, all in the purpose of committing these acts that are under the RICO charge. And I think if the prosecution had gone after 10 different individuals, it sort of would have sent a bit of a mixed signal to the jury of, well, who was really in charge here? If you're going after all these 10 people equally, was Combs really?
Did you and Cassie use together? Marijuana, cocaine, ketamine? Where did those drugs come from? I would have them. She would have them. How often did you get drugs for Cassie? Often. What kind of drugs did you get for her? Those oxy pills and cocaine and sometimes ketamine. Did Cassie pay you for these drugs? Yes. Did you ever get drugs for Mr. Combs? Yes. How many times? Just a few. What did you get? Ecstasy and ketamine and G. Was there ever a time where you got drugs for Mr. Combs? Just one time. What did you get him on that occasion? Cocaine. So a little bit back and forth there about what kind of drugs she got Mr. Combs. But Elizabeth, is that why she needed protection? Or, just, oh my gosh, you were possessing drugs and distributing them? Or is it because one of the underlying predicate crimes for racketeering conspiracy that the prosecution is hoping to prove is possession and distribution of narcotics and controlled substances? Is she a co-conspirator?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. And I think that's why she was offered immunity. So she talked about in her testimony, procuring, possessing, selling drugs. She talked about taking drugs with Cassie. One of the things that the racketeering charge is stating is that he used these individuals to commit certain offenses, including drug offenses. So what she's saying she did falls directly in line with that. So in exchange for her not being prosecuted about possessing drugs and even selling drugs, she testified she sold drugs to Cassie. She would get offered this protection. So I think that's the main. She also testified to other things about witnessing, abuse that Diddy inflicted upon Cassie. I think that kind of helps to support the sex trafficking charge and coercion and abuse and all that. But she wouldn't really be subject to criminal liability there. So that's why I think the drug charges the drug aspects of her testimony really led to her needing immunity.
Elizabeth, phrase that, please. Sure. You testify. Means is that you can't be prosecuted for anything that you testify to today as long as it's the truth. Is that correct? Could you rephrase that, please? Sure. You testified that you understand that what immunity means is that you cannot be prosecuted for any crimes that you discuss or testify to today. Yes. And that the only way you lose that protection is if you lie? Yes. Tell me your understanding who gets to decide if you're lying. The prosecutor. The prosecutors. All right. Now, Elizabeth, a few things here. What do you think she was going at there? Because I guess the question is, does the granting of immunity, does it make a witness less credible in the minds of the jury?
Yeah, good question. So I think what she was trying to go at is trying to hint whether she was being truthful or not in her testimony, whether she understood the ramifications if you're not truthful, even if you have immunity. I know a lot of people say, they think witnesses are less credible if they get immunity because, they're getting this protection from the prosecution. They're more likely to give testimony that skews in favor of the prosecution. I actually don't think so. Again, like I said, immunity doesn't protect you from perjury. So they have the understanding that if they don't tell the truth and they don't testify truthfully, they could be still subject to some kind of liability or penalty, if you will. And I also just think being summoned as a witness in a criminal case where you have allegedly committed some criminal actions, that's nerve-wracking for people. So I think already that amount of pressure, I think, would help compel people to testify truthfully. So I don't think it makes
to drop immunity and prosecute somebody.
Right. So on cross-examination, maybe defense attorneys hit the witness
Who beat Cassandra Ventura. So he takes the stand, and by the way, he wanted to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He was granted immunity to testify. Why? Well, what does he say? He claims he saw the surveillance footage of Combs and Cassie, that he receives a call from Combs' chief of staff, Christina Coram, who asks for the video, okay? Tells her off the record, it's bad. She calls back at one point, this time with Combs on the line, who also asks for the video. Garcia even emails management about this. Apparently a copy was shown to the jury. Combs allegedly says that he would take care of him in exchange for the video. Garcia reaches out to his supervisor, who agreed to hand over the video for $50,000. Combs calls Garcia Eddie my angel, and in the end he testified that Combs gave him $100,000. He signed an NDA. He testified he split the money with his supervisor and another officer on duty. He kept $30,000 for himself. Apparently told by Combs not to make big purchases. Apparently didn't deposit any of the money into a bank account and reported on his taxes. And then he claims that Combs reached back out to him a short time after, said, "Happy Easter, Eddie, my angel. God is good. God put you in my life for a reason." He also testified that when authorities contacted him in June of 2024, so this is after CNN published a copy of the Intercontinental video for the whole world to see, he claims he wasn't truthful with authorities about his role in all of this, that he deleted messages with other security officers, and then only allegedly came clean about the payout with the government when he got an attorney. So, Elizabeth, he needed immunity, right?
He absolutely did. And I know several folks were given immunity here. When I saw the details of his testimony, I thought this is someone who really needed it. So this goes straight to some of the charges under the RICO racketeering charge. Obviously, you said bribery. I think even possibly obstruction of justice. He's saying he took this large sum of money to sign this NDA, basically not discuss this this incident, giving over the files to Combs, what he maybe thought was the last copy of it. So you could argue that might be obstruction of possible justice. Those two things.
He also testified that he drove Combs to confront his rival Suge Knight at a place called Mel's Diner while Combs was apparently armed with guns. Elizabeth, why did he need protection?
Yeah, so I think, again, he's sort of implicated in a lot of the other charges as well. So coercion, not necessarily kidnapping or forced labor or things like that, but possible coercion, abuse. Remember, also these assistants were the ones that were helping to set up hotel rooms for freak-offs, having to clean things afterwards, placing potential drugs there. So obviously you have the drug aspect, but then you also have the possible facilitating of these freak-offs, which Cassie testified to were not consensual, which kind of helps support the sex trafficking, the prostitution charges, especially if it took place in New York, obviously.
He's sick, sick, sick. I hope he gets everything coming to him. I'm gonna jump off here. I hope this audio is working all right. I didn't need to test it this long, but